and welcome to episode 26 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode features an interview with Northern Ireland poet Matthew Rice, who reads from his book-length poem about working in a factory, part of which was published recently in Poetry Review. Then we have a wide range of poems with different takes on the theme of inside and/or outside. Poets include Alison Jones, John White, Helen Overell, Clare Starling, Pat Winslow, Jane Thomas, Susan Thomas, Guy Jones, Polly Walshe, Maureen Jivani, Julia Webb, John Daniel, Diana Bell, Stephen Claughton, and Lucy Ingrams. Despite having a father who is a poet and being surrounded by the good and great of the Northern Ireland poetry world in early life, Matthew Rice's poetry journey has not been an easy one, as he explains in this interview. His first book, The Last Weather Observer, published by Summer Palace Press in 2021, was a Poetry Book Society choice. His next book, which is the creative part of his PhD, is forthcoming from Fitzcarraldo Press.
My father, Adrian Rice, is a poet, quite a well-known poet, and he was getting into poetry in the mid to late 80s, when I would have been 5, 6, and he and an artist called Ross Wilson, a visual artist, became very friendly, and they collaborated on a project called the Muck Island Box in 1990, which was a collection of 12 poems and 12 corresponding images. So my dad wrote the poems, Ross did the images, and they released it in a limited edition of 100 boxes, and it garnered a lot of attention and publicity in the news and stuff and around cultural networks. And people like Michael Longley bought a box. Van Morrison came to the launch and bought a box. I remember being a kid and liking Van Morrison's music because my dad liked his music and stuff like that. So I remember meeting him at the launch when I was about 7 or 8, and so it sort of garnered this attention. And so around that time, there was a lot of poetry kind of around me. A lot of poets, my dad became friendly with people like Seamus Heaney and Tom Paulin, Ian Duig, Michael Longley. So that kind of was always kind of working its way into my psyche at the time. And then as my dad's career progressed with the writing, he ended up co-founding a press called Abbey Press with another poet called Mel McMahon. And it went from strength to strength in the late 90s, up into the late 2000s, and they published people like Michael Longley, and they did stuff in translation as well from people like the Hungarian poet István Baka and things like that. So it's always kind of been a presence in my life from a young age. And I used to write stories when I was a kid, and write poetry when I was a kid, and paint pictures when I was a kid. Then when I got into my teens, it kind of dissipated. And then it sort of came back. I visited the Yeats Museum in the mid-20s in Dublin with my dad, and then my mum and I went to Rome the year after. And in between that kind of period, in my mid-20s, I kind of got the bug for writing again. And ever since then, I've been trying to do it in earnest. So there's always Seamus Heaney, as there is for a lot of people. And through Seamus Heaney's work, I actually kind of got into Eastern European poets pretty quickly. there was a book of essays called by Seamus Heaney called Finders Keepers, which introduced me to people like Zbigniew Herbert, Czesław Miłosz, Miroslav Holub, people like this. So instead of discovering other Irish poets through Heaney, I discovered Eastern European poets through Heaney. So I kind of went in a circuitous route back to the Irish poets via Eastern Europe. So like starting out, people like Miroslav Holub, Anna Akhmatova, Joseph Brodsky, Marina Tsvetaeva, Zbigniew Herbert, and then American poets like Elizabeth Bishop, Raymond Carver, Sylvia Plath, obviously. So it was kind of like a domino effect, kind of set off by reading Heaney's work first and foremost, but then that book of essays called Finders Keepers really kind of produced a kind of a snowball effect of just like different types of poems and what poetry could do, and free verse. Is it like, for instance, Zbigniew Herbert writes a lot in free verse with no punctuation, so it's all about what effect the line break is having on the sense making of the stanzas and things like that. All stuff that I wasn't really aware of before I read Heaney, kind of close reading these people. So I suppose I read more of those people than I did Heaney, funnily enough. But then obviously I went back and read all of Heaney's oeuvre. Very underrated guy for prose, actually. Very, very good prose writer, Seamus Heaney, and very, very insightful. So initially it would have been those kind of people that really got me into it. As you probably tell from a lot of those names, wasn't very many contemporary or very many living poets at the time. So I kind of got into the dead people first, and then kind of discovered the living people as I went on. But they were the initial kind of real kind of they lit the touch paper for me, really. So I worked in a factory I worked odd jobs and stuff for years. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life till I was even when I took poetry properly seriously, I still didn't know what direction I wanted to go or anything like that. So by the time I was about 33, I realized that I wanted to take this thing, poetry, and kind of pursue it as far as I could take it, in terms of not just writing poems and sending them to magazines and then working, a job I didn't have any interest in. I wanted to kind of find something that was more aligned with my passion for poetry. So I decided to to do an undergraduate degree through the Open University in English language and literature, which took 6 years part-time. And I did it while working a full-time job in a factory, 1 year of which was a 12-hour night shift. During that time, I was kind of skeptical of university stuff and things like that, because I'd been hearing a lot of people, speaking disparagingly of them and talking about cliques and things like that. So I didn't really know what to make of that. But then, around the same time, I was getting to know very good people from Queen's, who've become lifelong friends now. And this is before I was anywhere near even thinking about a plan for a master's. But the plan always was kind of in the background in my mind, in the back of my mind was, that I would do an undergraduate degree and then hopefully a master's. And then I didn't think about PhD until I was doing the master's. And then it just seemed like a natural next step. And, to get some teaching experience and things like that. But in terms of being antagonistic about it, it came from a position of not really being aware of what going to the Seamus Heaney Centre or a university like that would entail. Once I got to know people, I realized how welcoming they were. And I think there was a bit of a misconception, to my mind anyway, prior to me sort of being in and around the institution, was that it was kind of you need to have the right kind of look to you, or you need to have the right kind of background. And it's just not that way at all. It's just people of all backgrounds, all classes, all races. It's just people who love poetry. The only prerequisite is you just have to have got a qualification that enables you to get in the door, and that doesn't matter if it comes from, you know, an open university degree from someone who has 2 GCSEs like me, or somebody who knew what they wanted to do earlier in their life and managed to get a degree through a more traditional route. So now that I'm in and around the campus and stuff, I realize that my misconceptions were kind of misguided, but I can understand why people do feel antagonistic or kind of skeptical. But I've had nothing but positive experiences, and I've been on both sides of the fence, you know, kind of working class background, working in a day job, just scribbling away, trying to, and then doing a master's at Queen's and now a PhD. So I've been on both sides of the fence. I've kind of gone from, you know, in the early days reading exclusively dead poets to reading almost exclusively living poets. And that comes from getting to know quite a few of them. I mean, I've also been lucky enough at the Heaney Centre to have been taught by some of my favorite poets, people like Leontia Flynn and Gail McConnell, Stephen Sexton. So, you know, friends, teachers, contemporaries. And I think in terms of being influenced, I think we can be influenced indirectly and directly. I think when you're part of a scene, whether it's any kind of scene, a music scene or a writing scene or an acting scene, I think that when you're all partaking in the art and the pastime and you're all enjoying it, I think that you kind of spur each other on. Like, so if one of us publishes a poem in a magazine and, you know, it's a really good poem, I think that it kind of spurs us, the rest of us, to kind of want to reach that kind of bar and keep pushing the envelope, and or not even the envelope, that's disingenuous, keep pushing ourselves, keep pushing oneself to kind of keep producing, you know. Michael Longley said it well when he was talking about the 60s scene in Belfast, when he was talking about when, you know, him and Heaney and Mahan, etc., all came along as a crop. He said that it was like a convection current of quality, you know, rising, you know, kind of each good poem written by each of them kind of spurred the others to kind of rise up a little bit. And I think that's accurate. You know, I think any positive, any productive scene in any creative zone, I think is the same. I think if you ask an actor, a painter, a writer, a musician, you know, who's part of a scene that is thriving, I think they'd probably say something similar. The new book is it's a book length poem, basically in sections, set during a 12-hour night shift in a factory similar to the one I worked in. And it's which was a plastic molding factory. It made plastic molded parts for the interior of airplanes, and also exported goods to China and America, England, you know, mainland England and down south. Basically, the way it's structured is there's a prologue, and then there's the main body of the text, which is all the sections are time stamped so that the reader is guided through the shift, if you like, and then there's an epilogue. But there was 11 sections published in the Poetry Review back in the spring there in April. I could read those. So there's no titles to these, so I'll just read them as they are. Instead of the titles, I'll just read the timestamps and then read the poems. So these first two bits are part of the prologue. There's another bit to that as well. And then what follows is just the poems that were published up until midnight. Figuratively speaking, midnight, as it pertains to the night shift. And these aren't in sequence. These are just a selection, but they go from 8 o'clock up to midnight. I wake at 3 a.m., the hour no one wants. Really, it's my heart that wakes me, beating its way out. I pace the floor and sing under my breath the song of the calm, and wonder if the factory is doing this. It's Monday tomorrow. It always is when dreams are alarms. How 21st century, the factory we pull ourselves out of bed for, the cliffs inside us crumbling into the ocean, nozzles purging old material for new molded births, frequent flying formaldehyde greeting our lungs. The clock-in machine says thank you, thank you, thank you to our fingerprint. Our grateful 15 minutes at 10 o'clock, the fresh air of a cigarette. Bobby the Spark parallels the hours ahead with a marathon, not a sprint, to be countered with an ultra marathon, not a marathon. As the weekly wage puts us back in the black, we see it out till 8, the day shift finish at 5, laying down their dustpans and brushes, emptying the bins. 7:57 p.m. The French horn of the snail in the car park is equal to the aperture of the wind and silent as a bell. Though no winter breath halos above its head, its pumping valve trail glistens a path beyond the dead. 8:01 p.m. It's been 15 years since he arrived with a few empty phrases to work through the night, a shaft of morning sun warming his fleece when, near the big machine, they found him hanging at the first klaxon. 9:07 p.m. Just as blood is always trying to escape, making a break at the slightest nick, so it is at 9:04 p.m. when Johnny Cope takes it upon himself to lower the heaviest tool in the factory from the heart of the biggest machine, the chain of the hoisting crane itself shuddering like a hangman's rope, onto the only pallet truck available, far too narrow, the tool unhooked and finally tipping, all 1 ton of which Johnny Cope takes upon himself to catch, his crushed wrist and hand, from which at 9:07 p.m. blood escapes. 9:31 p.m. A whiff of burning plastic in the factory's moon squares is a curl of cigarette smoke vanishing up the chimney of a cold fireplace on a Saturday afternoon. What of that budding berry tree in the graveyard under which we inhaled and disappeared into our own lungs and pretended to know the stone at the entrance was 1,000 years? What of the kids on skateboards, bunny hopping curbs on BMXs, none of them truly believing? 9:53 p.m. Wee Gail's cooking knife, sharpened on the belt grinder next to the ancient Tufnell saw in the machine shop, would take the tip off my finger before I'd know it. It's that sharp, the one I'm using to dice this cooked chicken breast and slather in a tamarind sauce. The edge is honed bright as the quarter moon. I imagine working my way down the finger like you would a carrot. I think about this even when I'm not dicing chicken breast in the factory canteen. And the times I think about it, I begin to feel sorry for the hand to which the finger belongs, its population of molecules so used to existing, so content with their lot, traveling every day and night their little valleys and pathways. On trains, for example, I think about it. On walks sometimes. 10:11 p.m. Ghostly in high vis, the night guard gives voice to the hour echoing into the next and retains no prospect but of trees and all the dark and chilling dew. Who knows how he gets from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and on? And though we're all on the same shift, it's true my machine marks time with each spindle-cutting revolution, its mundane magic rumoring the future, stacked with Chitilio's hills and dales, a dyer hanging his silks from the highest wall. 11:01 p.m. Management returned home from China, promising to improve conditions for us, the workers, bearing, like photos they won't develop, ideas. while our lungs glow exotic as Hevia Brasiliensis. Not marks the spot, but skull and crossbones, airbound chemicals heavy with poison, magicked in that rumored realm of may cause cancer. 11:23 p.m. Hell as an idea of what work could be isn't night meteors as corvettes of love, or the narcotic beauty of rockets on the news burning up on re-entry. It's an idea of what Gary could be, the other Gary, whistling an entire 12-hour night shift, whatever rhapsody filters through the fugacious O of his lips. Oh, for an esplanade. Oh, for noise-cancelling headphones. Oh, and that podcast I forgot to download about the flowering buddleia the kid MacNeice viewed the sea beyond at Portrush. Midnight. The night is proletarian, a morgue of ghosts, given the present is a borderline. If the purpose of existence is to give meaning to the lives of others, how does one account for loneliness? Yeah, so the first book was called The Last Weather Observer. It was published by Summer Palace Press, a great mainstay of Irish independent publishing. I like the poems in that book, and there is kind of an ecological concern within that book, which seems to find its way into my work. I mean, I suppose I am, like any conscientious person, concerned about the climate and where we might find ourselves even in 50 years, let alone what we leave behind. But so I suppose that maybe that kind of existential kind of threat weaves its way into my stanzas. The Last Weather Observer, it kind of started as a kind of gathering of poems, and then I kind of, whilst I added new poems to it, I began to find a kind of through line. I like the poems in that book. There's maybe two of them that if I had the chance to republish, I would cut from it. But other than that, I'm happy enough with it as a first book, but it is what it is. Hopefully, what you want to see as you publish books is a kind of a progression or a kind of a furthering of ideas, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. And I think maybe this book, it came from something. So it came as when I was thinking of what a subject for my PhD, and I'd never ever wanted to, because I wrote most of those poems in that book, The Last Weather Observer, while I was working in the factory, and there's nothing about the factory in it. I was writing to escape because I just was just felt like I was just in a dead, well, I was in a dead end job, always in the red every week, just working to pay the rent and have a few, working to pay the rent, put the electricity in, pay the internet, and have a couple of quid left over for a few beers at the weekend. And that's, and then just trying to get through to next Wednesday to get paid again. So that's kind of what it was like working in that factory. But I'm actually very grateful for the experience there, because it gave me a subject for a PhD, and it gave me my second book. So when I started writing the book, I was it all came really quickly. Once I figured out the structure, once I figured out that the timestamp format would give me a chance to be able to, like, it wouldn't need to be a continual poem. I mean, I had a couple of models for it. One was The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, because it's in 5 sections. It's a long poem, but the sections can be read on their own as well. And the other main blueprint for me was a book called The Fall, the Love, and World We're Young by Stephen Sexton, he writes a poem for it's a long poem as well, but it's a poem written for every level of Super Mario World. And it's basically an elegy to his late mother. And it's, a fantastic piece of work. So I took those two and kind of figured out my own kind of format for this book, which resulted in, a prologue, a time-stamped main body of text, and an epilogue. Yeah, so I had a lot of fun writing it, in terms of just discovering along the way and realizing that I had all this wealth of material, but I just was far too close to it when I was working in the factory. I just hated working, and I just hated where I was at in life at that time. So I couldn't have written about it at the time. I needed distance. and being fortunate enough to get funding to do this PhD off the back of that has been a real blessing in hindsight. I'll finish off just with one poem from the first book. I'll read one that illustrates the ecological kind of concern. This is just a wee short poem. It's called Bright Mustard Coat, and it's dedicated to Greta Thunberg. My little nephew's bright mustard coat strikes a profile in the dimming January light, the vacated roundabout spinning on its axis, the empty swings hypnotizing the magpie whose meaning is merely tangential, while before my eyes scabs of frost heal all too quickly on the steel rigging, which reminds me Robert Frost's surname was serendipitous when he said the meaning of a poem is like an ice cube melting on a skillet. And my thoughts are glacial as I consider the stopped clock efficiency with which the Jetsons predicted our future. Car, points my nephew, whose 18 months carry my childhood under their covered wagon.
Very many thanks, Matthew, for the interview and a great reading. Some of our poets have taken the theme of inside/outside in a very physical sense. Others have treated it much more symbolically. Alison Jones does both in this encounter with a captive wildcat.
Felix Sylvestris, Captive. Wild cat in the zoo, muscles along the metal perimeter of a gift, named enclosure. We will preserve what we are losing and keep it here for everyone. I have paid to see a species in mourning, narrated as too dangerous to be free, while monsters roam beyond the fence. Cat I must not touch, though her banded body and clubbed tail ghost me to the cat who prowls my kitchen. When will we stop believing we are saving what is gone? The sleight of hand, glittering coins pulled from earth and air, the fearless fight for territory, the death kiss of dagger teeth. Her pacing is relentless, like a prisoner circling a barren yard, or a friend's ex-boyfriend who worked on the rigs and ran around the helipad every day like a vulnerable trapped rodent. Her origami eye folds in forest memories, diminishing auroch, tarpan, brown bear to fine amber tissue, as a paper sign sings wild she has never known.
John White's poem also treats ideas about captivity and displacement, but in a very different context.
At Ballyrolly Farmhouse. The poem begins with a quote from Robert Sugar, child resident at the Mill Isle Kinder Farm. The farm was my country. Escaped from the crystal knack, they pitched up near tracts of patched airfields and bevelled hedges, wind to skin you, a clapped farmhouse where they stood the damaged flax back in better days. Names like Sugar, Jacoby are strange, yet they seem also strangers to each other, learning English at the half-Scots school in tidy columns, psalms flung from chests that burgeon. 2 Clydesdales, a Ferguson tractor, bring barley, beet, potatoes. Mentor Erwin plays the saxophone. A pit stop between Mill Isle and Carradore becomes their cosmos. The peninsula unbends, On serrated shorelines, waders root for something intact. There's newsreel shows in town. What they take in fragments, grit their teeth hard, crack on.
Helen Overell also takes us back to World War II, but this time with the women munition workers.
Filling factory, number 5 team. Number 1 team worked with high explosives. Called up at start of war, just 17, set to work in munitions, packing shells. Whole teams searched once through those gates, and again after changing. No Kirby grips allowed, nothing metal, although wedding rings, if any, could be kept on and taped over. Worst bit were fitting lids. Felt awful first time. Came over all faint. Girl showing me what to do and not do, looked at me, face drained, pale, skin clemmed, walked me outside into fresh air. Just enough solder needed, and only on rim. Too much, and shell failed. Best part were filling crates, being asked to tuck in all those letters. Begged, I know I sent one this morning, but can you put another in for me this afternoon? Love notes, going to and fro to men at airfield. Total strangers they were, taking a risk against all the odds. You don't know anything about him. Says he's not married. They all say that, love. Mind you, there were at least one marriage came about, and still going strong. He were a tall, dark, handsome Scot, and she were but a slip of a girl, a right Yorkshire lass, both old and grey now. The relief at end of shift. Stood in line, patted about. Who knows why? Who'd have wanted out of that? Hurried along, shedding those overalls caked with powder, larking about with not a lot on, stepping over barrier onto clean side and into own clothes, tidying and pinning up hair ready for Civvy Street, before yet another search. What on earth could they have been looking for? Then freedom of sorts, hands, face, yellow. No amount of washing would shift that. Awful if you were asked to a wedding. Factory canaries, for the duration.
Clare Starling's poem conveys a sense of deep entrapment.
Bee on the Tube. 30 metres down, below Green Park, in bloomless gloom it draws its loops tighter, smacks against scratched glass, sideswipes the shuffling beggar who now starts to loudly shout, "Sorry to bother you, ladies and gentlemen." Bee's mad buzz blends with the tunnel's empty shriek, while, crammed in tight, ranks of the flower-free give a blind flinch, eyes fixed on small screens, each the sad protagonist of a half-reflected story. 100 animals in a transportation device. No one except the wild-eyed supplicant who flails his arms like a storm-blasted tree is of a mind to heed the spiralling bee.
Pat Winslow writes about the pain of an interior that is flawed.
The cracks are showing. Those hard-to-reach places aren't cleaned anymore. Limescale crusts the sinks and shower. The toilet bowl is scratched and yellow. Windows rattle, doors squeal. The chimney leaks. There's food on the dining room floor. Pale cobwebs hammock the garage shelves and walls. Tins of paint that will never be used again are stacked 3 high, seams rotting, their hammered lids stuck. Rust creeps along pitted screwdrivers and tenon saws. Carpet tacks and nails turn to dust in cardboard trays. Light bulbs go unchanged. The house begins to darken. Each time you visit, there's some new corner to brighten. The shine, the gift you bring with you each time, takes days to restore. You need a proper scouring more and more, something like the sea to leave you scrubbed and raw.
Jane Thomas also writes about the failure of home. This poem, Your Front Door, comes from the collection on Alzheimer's she is working on.
Your front door, the frame and limit of your world. Locked in and locked out, sentry alarms on both sides. Pane of mottled glass conjures spectres of all who call. Silver letterbox sealed, communications long redirected. Draft excluder, sleeping serpent eating its own tail. You want to go home, but you're already here.
In the next poem, Susan Thomas brings us outside.
Outside by Susan Thomas. You say you want to die outside. I think this is a first, although I do recall long ago a patient in their bed in the courtyard, dappled by the afternoon trees, the leaves tinkling like milk bottle tops, slipping away whilst they slept. It was hard to notice the lack of rise from their chest, the gentle absence of breath replaced by birdsong, but placing a hand on their shoulder, they could not be woken. It was pretty much perfect. Now we discuss what we will do if it rains, if it is night, if the wind blows or the sun screams down, where we will plug in the bed. Maintenance is called. A gazebo is erected. These days it is difficult to connect to the stars, but we circumnavigate the cosmos, try and get you there, respond to the primordial pull rather than protocols. We open the doors and let the curtains billow like rolling waves, feel the chill rise of gooseskin on our sleeveless arms, laugh with you as we wheel your bed over the doorframe bump into the garden, bringing you closer to the earth.
Guy Jones gives us a much less benign view of outside.
The man outside. The man outside my house is a long way from home. He showed me a picture on his phone once. There was a large table laden with dishes, bread, vegetables, fruit, and jugs of fresh, clean spring water. Beyond the table on a dry paddock, chickens roamed and waited for the arrival of brothers and sisters, giggling children, and the chattering of family that is everything. The man in the car outside my house is a long way from home. I know because he told me once, how his mother was the candle of the house, a light that was everything, that never went out, and how his father broke the bread at the head of the table and listened to the news that his sons and daughters brought from all four corners of his world. The man who sleeps in the car outside my house is a long way from home. I know because he painted me an image of how beautiful his country was before the bombs fell and he had to dig his son out of the rubble, before they started carrying guns and bullying on the streets, before people disappeared and they raped. He left with his wife and children when the guns pointed at his head and they strung him up for days in a dark place. They washed up on this shore, where his marriage broke on the rocks of thoughts that will not stop, of gun points and anger and fear. The man in the car outside my house lies awake on a borrowed inflatable mattress, drinking begged-for coffee, waiting for the slow cogs of helpfulness in a distant land to turn, straining the internet for news of brothers and sisters, and whether father still breaks bread, and if a candle still burns in his long way home.
Polly Walsh writes about another outsider.
Blink. What is there to be said of the woman with nowhere to live, except that she appears if you forget to blink, looking red in the face and raw, with a pizza crust in her hand, picked up from the street. If you give her a note or a coin, won't it make her more keen to step into the land between your blinks, posing a question you can't stand? Her skin, you think, how did it get so lined? After how many hours of cold and sun and wind did she start to look so bad? Aren't there services for people like her? Why didn't she look for help or simply take more care? How is it your fault if she doesn't fit and won't follow the rules? How are you the culprit in this? You can only get on with your life and leave her to hers, which, from what people say, she may well prefer.
Maureen Jivani presents another troubled outsider, woman or angel.
Alma is a god in ruins. Barely dressed and cold on a bench outside the Blue Angel, Alma examines her dislocated wing. Featherlight and swept across her knees, it is structurally sound. No broken quills or shafts, no shattered barbs or barbules, all hooks intact. Its feathers softer, purer than a child's first laugh. Its scent is snow. What then are we to make of this, her inability to part the heavy air and soar to reach her paradise? Which beast convinced her of such brokenness, cast her down, afraid to fly?
Julia Webb's first poem also shows us a woman who is not okay, while her second presents a more positive view.
A woman's hair is trailing through the mud. The river is flowing past her head. The moon shines placidly above. A light drizzle begins to fall. The evening is as black as soot or coal. Her head is pillowed on the grass, her face already wet so that, at first, she doesn't notice the drizzle fall. Her dress is ripped and a button has come off. The river is quiet but flows insistently past. She wonders where ducks go at night. She wonders if she should try and stand up. The grass is soft and wet beneath her head. Water keeps falling from the sky. It pools at the corners of her eyes. She doesn't move. The rain is cool and gentle. It doesn't hurt at all. The person she thought was her friend has gone. There's just the rain, the river, the grass, the mud. The sea wasn't getting any closer. I was holding the road in my mind, but the road was moving, or I was moving. I couldn't tell anymore. I was no longer relevant. Words snaked out of my mouth. It was we the whole way. We were in the car. The car was a live thing. We followed its will. We were all around the houses. We were up and down and sideways. We were in between. We were falling down the humid cracks of the day, rolling away in the gutter like hot coins. You asked me if this was the right way, and I knew I should know the answer, but my head was full of song lyrics. They spooled out across my mind. I was a camera, filming blindly, not taking anything in. The light was spilling everywhere. It made the trees divine.
Still outside, John Daniels celebrates a pear tree and a marriage.
Anniversary gift. You bought me a pear tree, conference, with sweet flavour, but the bushes around it grew faster, hiding your gift in thick shrubbery, year after married year. The pear tree persisted, breaking through thick-leafed invaders, proffering a limb to the sunlight like an arm pushed through a letterbox, bright oval leaves appearing, surviving my gardening skills, the darkness of fir and laburnum, hostile brambles and ivy, a gift from the tangled thicket of love, with white blossom in May, a pear, a wedding bouquet.
Diana Bell celebrates the full moon, the immensity of outside, the solace of inside.
Full moon night. I step outside. There's a tightness in the air. Clouds are moving fast across the sky. The moon has a halo and no birds sing. A deer steps lightly through the trees. The fox knows this is a good night to take the unwary. And what do I know? That the earth is a sphere in space, that there are 7 billion humans on the planet, that the moon is 300,000 miles away, that there are 8 planets in the solar system, that we are part of a galaxy, that there are 100 billion galaxies. I breathe deeply and go back inside where music is playing.
Lizzie Ballagher's take on the relationship between inside and outside is perhaps more unsettling.
No walls, no windows. Untamed oceans at the screen door,
shut tight against their salt, their sting and spatter of sand, bear in the same sea scent which whines, insinuating through keyholes, froths in foaming jars of samphire on the kitchen shelf. Outside comes to in, flash of goldfinch wings, black, yellow, silver. They one year nested on the porch in pots of blue lobelias, salvias. On mats, the smear of mud from Havenfold, a field, though rank with cow dung, where blood-red poppies blow in May. The shrill of chrome-beaked herring gulls haunting a chimney breast, blown in by gales, lamenting on our sills. Black-beaked head of a volcano looming through the window frame, demonic shadow cast across galaxies of lupins, lupins all unploughed. No walls can work, no windows, doors can block, when in all our houses, outside comes to inside like a tide.
And moving to something completely different, Stephen Claughton writes about umbrellas, prompted by the photographs of Saul Leiter.
This poem's called Umbrellas, and it's based on pictures by the American photographer Saul Leiter, and it has as an epigraph a quote from him. It's not where it is or what it is that matters, but how you see it. Umbrellas. Rain streaks a cafe window on the Lower East Side, blurring the street beyond. The same in the automat and the barber's shop, a dissolve of lens-like droplets. It's a rainy day in New York, a diluvial downpour. Slickers and rubbers are out, and it's hats off to men in hats who are having their last hurrah in 50s America. But the shots Saul really wants, the ones it's worth getting wet for, are those that feature umbrellas. Red, green, maroon and black, they mushroom everywhere, dotted along the street, or clustering at crosswalks, forming testudos braced against the incoming attack. Rain beats on their drum-tight skins and bounces off. It's neat how their shapely curves offset the sharp-elbowed angles of Gotham's gridiron blocks, making the East Coast exotic. All over Manhattan Island, umbrellas are opening up the Japanese floating world of ukiyo-e. Geishas blossom like cherry trees, with bright paper parasols, making light of it all. Not umbrellas again, his lab assistant groans. I love umbrellas, says Saul.
And our final poem, which signals the close of the season as well as the close of the episode, comes from Lucy Ingrams.
Putting away tools. This poem will not give you pippins, wax caps, red wings, walnuts, gales, or other names in the Book of Autumn, or rewind dialects of summer, common blue, or damselfly, or marguerite, or dwell on pale bodhisattva bulbs beneath the clay, waiting for enlightenment or spring. Instead, this poem combs defeat and grass that used to high and tine the sun to green, but yellows to tobacco now, straggles in the dark of stars and cold, which leaves the mower, some shed space for it, and sitting out the long vowels of winter.
This episode has been so varied and rich, I'm quite surprised it is all squeezed inside the hour. You can find poet biographies, details of publications, and text of unpublished poems on poetryworthhearing.biz, where you can also see information about the next episode. I hope you have enjoyed listening.